Cece, and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. So in the month of August, I read 13 books, 4 of which were either graphic novels or trade paperbacks, but 13 total, which is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with myself because I think that that number is going to be lower now that I am abroad. So the beginning of this month was Booktubeathon, where I read 7 books in 7 days. That was where the bulk of this reading got done. And the first book that I read for Booktubeathon was Amelia Ann is Dead and Gone by Kat Rosenfield. This was a very interesting book. In this book, we follow our main character, Becca, who lives in a small town. And it's also all tied in with the mystery of the evening of high school graduation. A dead girl is found on the side of the road in this small town, and rumors are flying, and there's this mystery that's going on, and somehow Becca feels very connected to this dead girl whose name no one even knows. The prose was really dense in this book, is I guess the best way I could put it. It was written very lyrically, it was very descriptive, and that made it sometimes really interesting to read, and sometimes it came off a bit melodramatic, I suppose. Overall, the story was good. The mystery was a bit predictable, I felt. I wanted more from the book based on how much I'd enjoyed the really creepy small town aspect of the story overall, so I decided to give this book a total of 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in August was American Born Chinese by Jean Luen Yang. This is a graphic novel that I absolutely loved. It follows 3 different storylines, all centered mainly on this one kid, Jin Wang, who is an American-born Chinese kid. But there are also other stories, like the story of the Monkey King, which is more of a mythology-type story. And then there's also another story that is almost written like a sitcom about a boy named Chin Ki, who is Chinese stereotype, who is ruining his American cousin Danny's life. And somehow all of those stories intertwine. This just came across to me as a very important graphic novel. The different narratives and the way that they intertwined and the way it was about acceptance and about being different was very interesting, and I really liked all of the characters and how you could see their similarities and their differences. So overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of August was Heartburn by Nora Ephron, and if you've seen me talk about Booktubeathon at all, you know that I did not really enjoy this book. So this is a semi-autobiographical story by Nora Ephron, which is about a woman named Rachel, who is 7 months pregnant with her second child when her husband announces that he is cheating on her, and she doesn't really know what to do with this. But basically, the book is all about Rachel trying to decide what she's going to do about the fact that her husband is in love with someone else. So I did not enjoy this book at all. At all. The entire way through. Luckily, it was a really short book, but it did not sit with me. It came across, it was supposed to be a funny book about this topic, which is interesting, and it came across as almost a stand-up comedy type routine that was not translating well to a page. I really enjoy Nora Ephron's writing. In fact, I watched When Harry Met Sally on the plane to London, just to remind myself that I really love her writing. And I really love Sleepless in Seattle, so I think my problem with her writing stems from that I just enjoy it a lot more as a movie over a book. But I didn't like the main character. I thought her indecisiveness bothered me. The fact that she was trying to win her husband back when clearly he was in love with another person, it bothered me. I just did not like this book at all, and I gave it 1 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in August was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the first book in the Raven cycle. The Raven Boys follows 5 main characters, 4 of which are boys that go to a local school that are called the Raven Boys, by the other main character, Blue. Blue is a girl who is raised in a family of psychics, although she has no psychic power of her own, and on St. Mark's, she goes to a cemetery with her aunt and she sees a spirit, and her aunt tells her that if a person who has never seen spirits before sees a spirit on St. Mark's Eve, that means the person they see is either going to be their true love or they're going to kill them. And that's how it all starts. This was a very interesting book. I think that the book was really atmospheric. It definitely had a very strong creepy, weird aesthetic. My only thing with the aesthetic, though, was that I wish it had been tightened slightly. I felt like I didn't get enough answers about the different characters. Just, like, some of the Raven Boys especially, you got a lot more backstory than others, and some of the backstory you got wasn't really explained. I'm sure that that will be rectified in further books, but I wish that it had been tightened a little bit. I buddy read this book with Sana over at Inkbones Books, and I think we felt pretty similar in that aspect, that we wished that there had just been that it had been tightened up, that it had been a little sharper. And my other problem was that Blue wasn't quite as big a role as I wanted her to be. The Raven Boys were really interesting and I really enjoyed them, but the story started with Blue and then would sometimes leave her out, and she didn't quite seem like as fleshed out a character, and that kind of annoyed me. So overall, this whole story was really fascinating and I definitely want to continue on with the series, but I gave this first installment 4 out of 5 stars. Next up in August, I read Ghost Night by Cornelia Funk. This is a middle grade fantasy, and Cornelia Funk is one of my favorite authors, so I really expected to love this book, and I did not. So this book follows our main character, John, who has just been sent to a boarding school because his mother is dating this new guy who he doesn't like at all, and he's been sent off to boarding school, and the first night there, he sees ghosts who say that they are going to kill him. I like middle grade books. I enjoy middle grade fantasy a lot, but this book came off as written not quite well enough for me to consider it to be very good. I felt like it was a lot of, and then this happened, which was immediately followed by this happening, and then this, and there was a lot of showing instead of telling. Again, I know it's a middle grade book, but I've read intelligent middle grade books, and I felt like this didn't reach the standard even of Cornelia Funk's other middle grade books. Everything went way too fast, and I just unfortunately did not love this book a ton. Of course, it still had some good elements to it because it's Cornelia Funk and she can't entirely mess up a book, but overall I only gave this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in August, one of my favorite books that I've read so far this month, was The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. This book follows our main character, Cameron Post, who is from Montana, and it starts the day after her parents die in a horrible car crash. She's reeling and very upset because they're dead, but also she's very upset with herself because the first thought that she had upon finding out her parents were dead was that she was so glad they would never find out she kissed a girl. This book was so good and so interesting, and Cameron Post was a really interesting character. You follow her for a lot of years of her life. It starts when she's 12, and it continues on for a number of years until her incredibly religious aunt moves in and sort of takes over in raising her, to the point that, and this is included in the dust jacket, so it's not that spoilery, until she is sent to a camp to rectify her sinful ways. This book was very descriptive and it took me a long time to read, but it is one of those books where I don't mind that it takes a bit longer to get into and that the book overall is a bit more dense because the characters were really interesting and made it worth it, especially once you get to sort of the camp that Cameron Post is sent to. There are a lot of really interesting characters there and you get to explore different aspects of these LGBTQIA and plus. You get to see different aspects of that and how all of those characters interact alongside this really fascinating setting, and I just absolutely loved this book. I loved every minute of it. I wanted to reread it almost as soon as I finished it. Overall, as you can tell, I absolutely love this book and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The final book that I read for Booktubeathon was The True Adventures of Nicolo Zen by Nicholas Christopher. This is another book that I did not like at all. It follows our main character Nicolo Zen, who lives in Venice in the 1700s, just after his entire family has died due to illness. He has in his possession a gift from his father that is a magical clarinet. So he disguises himself as a girl and he goes to play at an orchestra for orphaned girls with his magical clarinet. The fact that he disguises himself as a girl was not mentioned in the dust jacket, and I think that it would have made me less inclined to read the book, because as another book about a very young boy, it really annoyed me the way he was written, especially in regards to living amongst a bunch of girls. This boy is 12 years old and he's immediately like falling in love. This book was another one also that followed along this formula of and then this, which was shortly followed by this, and none of it felt real. I mean, of course it's fiction, but it didn't feel immersive at all. It felt like I was having a story told at me instead of like being involved in the story. I didn't like the main character and I didn't really like the plot. I was really disappointed. I wanted to read a good book about Venice before I went to Venice. Overall, I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in August was Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is becoming a very, very big comic series on BookTube, and I'm really glad that I finally picked it up. I don't really know how to explain the plot of this book. There is a lot going on. It starts with these two characters who are on the run because they have sort of a forbidden romance because they are each from different planets who are currently at war, but there are hired assassins and different aliens, and it is told from the point of view of a baby that is born on the first page, which is interesting. I absolutely loved the beginning of this series and I can't wait to read more of it. It's been described as a Star Wars meets Game of Thrones kind of thing, and I definitely see those similarities, and I can see how people who like each of those franchises would find things that they loved in this series. The characters are really, really cool. I felt like I immediately understood the story. There was a lot going on, but it was explained to me in a way that worked, which I was really grateful for. But I really loved this, and I can't wait to read the rest, and I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness. This is the 3rd volume in the Scott Pilgrim graphic novel series by Brian Lee O'Malley. I really liked this book. I really liked the third volume. I had some issues with the 2nd volume where I rated it not quite as high as I rated the first one, but I felt like this book brought it back around to something I enjoyed. This is also the first book that I feel like where the movie has really diverged from the storyline. Not a ton, but there are certain scenes and elements that are really, really different, which were confusing to me as a person who's seen Scott Pilgrim vs. the World so many times. But I think that we're getting a little bit more in depth with the characters in a way that I really like, and I'm very curious to see how they are going to go into Ramona's character further, because I've heard that that is something that the graphic novel does far better than the movie, so I'm very excited to continue on with these. I gave Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness 4 out of 5 stars. Next up in August, I read The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. This is the bind-up of the 5 prequel novellas of the Throne of Glass series that I finally read. I've been saying all summer I was going to read it, and I read it. I really enjoyed this book. It took me a little bit to get into it and to get back into the vibe of the Throne of Glass world, but by the end I was definitely very invested again, and I was really excited about Selena again. I think my problem getting into the book was that the reason I have loved the Throne of Glass books is that I've loved the way Selena's character has developed over time, and it was really jolting to go back to a Selena before she had really started to develop as a character. But I did really like it, so I gave The Assassin and the Pirate Lord 3.5 out of 5 stars. The Assassin and the Healer I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. I gave The Assassin and the Desert 4 out of 5 stars. The Assassin and the Underworld I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. And The Assassin and the Empire I gave 4 out of 5 stars. The Assassin and the Healer was easily my favorite. It was a side of Selena I really enjoyed. So overall, I gave this whole collection 4 out of 5 stars. Next, in the month of August, I read another graphic novel. This one was This One Summer by Jillian Tamaki and Mariko Tamaki. They're cousins, which is really interesting. This is a book really about a girl kind of coming of age. It follows our main character, Rose, who has gone up to the same beach every summer, and it's been such a huge part of her childhood, but this summer things are different. Her parents won't stop fighting, and her friend Wendy are caught up in this drama that is happening. I absolutely loved this book. I randomly got it at the library. I'd heard a few good things about it, but really I got it just because it was available on the graphic novel shelf at my library, and I'm so glad I did. I think that it did such a good job talking about Rose's life and her growing up and changing feelings and how she's dealing with her parents fighting and how that can be seen. I thought all of the different characters and how we got a little bit of their lives was really interesting. It was just this really contained, beautiful story of a few people who go up to this beach house. I definitely want my own copy because I can see myself reading this a lot of times over and over again. It was so, so good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The second to last book that I read in the month of August was Bellman and Black by Diane Setterfield. You guys know I was really excited about this book because Diane Setterfield wrote one of my other favorite books, The 13th Tale, and so I was really excited to get into her second book, and it was a total disappointment. Bellman and Black follows our main character, William Bellman, starting from the age of 11 when he kills a rook, and then it fast forwards onto his life as a young man. He's very successful, he has a happy marriage, he has a happy life, he's a very lucky person until one by one all of the people around him start to die. This book was marketed as a sort of ghost story, and I was really disappointed, especially in that aspect, because the thing that's supposed to be the ghost-esque story is that every funeral William Bellman goes to, there is a strange man in black there who gives him these knowing looks or acts like they might know each other but they never speak. And throughout the bulk of this book, I was really enjoying that, and I was very curious to see where it would go. The book overall reminded me of a lot of historical fiction that I read when I was younger, sort of the Little Britches, A Day No Pigs Would Die, working on a farm, working as a businessman kind of storyline, and I really loved that, which is why I was so utterly disappointed by the end. I don't even know what happened at the end of this book. It made, like, no sense. The fact that there kept trying to be this element of magic or ghosts, and there were chapters told from the point of view of rooks, was very odd, and it just did not come across to me at all, and so I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I read in August was Memory Palace by Hari Kunzru. This was a book that I read for a class here in London, and it was a really interesting book. This is a dystopian book about a future London in which remembering words, memories, anything about the past is completely banned, and it follows our main character who is part of a society dedicated to remembering the past. This is a very quick book. I thought that this was a very fascinating book. I thought it was interesting the way that the main character would remember bits of the past that were sort of accurate, but were also entirely inaccurate, and how this remembering of the past was so important to all of the characters, but they weren't even remembering it correctly. But I really enjoyed this book. It was only 80 pages, it was very, very quick, but I thought that it raised a lot of interesting questions, and I really enjoyed my, hour of reading it. So overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, that is all of the books that I read in August. I have not finished Jane Eyre yet. I'm working on it. Thank you guys for watching. Down below in comments, let me know what your favorite book that you read this month was, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!